Hi, I'm Renee Locklear White. I'm Lumbee, and I'm standing in a small town called Bluemont, Virginia, in the northern part of Virginia. There's a really unique exhibit here that was up this year of 2024. It's a decolonized museum exhibit showing the continual occupation of indigenous peoples here in Loudoun County for 17,000 years, maybe longer. We're standing in Loudoun County, Virginia, where we had 3 indigenous language groups: the Algonquian-speaking peoples, Siouan-speaking peoples, and the Iroquoian-speaking peoples. We're standing on indigenous land here today to bring you this exhibit. I'd specifically like to acknowledge the Manahoac and the Shawandasi Tula, the Shawanaki, Shawnee, Patawomac, Piscataway Convoy, the Susquehannock and Haudenosaunee Tuscarora, as well as the displacement and disposition and continued presence of a number of other tribes that call Virginia home today. And that includes the Nottoway, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nazman, Nottoway, the Patawomac, the Pamunkey, Rappahannock, and Upper Mattaponi, as well as an unknown number of tribes that would have called this place home long ago that are extinct now. We're going to go inside now and show you the exhibit and show you a medicine wheel that's out front to grab people's attention as they drive by. We're outside the Plaster Museum where we have a giant medicine wheel hanging, and I've got a traditional smudge stick here of sage that I was burning to just have it burn while we talk about the significance of the indigenous medicine wheel. This has grabbed a lot of people's attention while they're driving down the road, and I think it's a decolonized way of getting people's attention to have them come over to find out, what does this mean? What's happening inside our museum this year? The significance of the medicine wheel and the colors vary depending on different tribes, but it's generally red, yellow, black, and white. The order of the color may change, but the general significance is there. We know that there was indigenous rings of circles in this country and around the world that our native peoples had ceremony. We don't know the significance of all these circles and concentric rings, but today we have this Native American indigenous medicine wheel that we all relate to. And what it means is, for here, the red signifies the east, and then the yellow here signifies the south, and then the black signifies the west, and the white is the north. So these are the 4 directions. There's a 4-direction medicine wheel, and it helps us know where we are in time and where other people are in relationship to us. For example, in the east, that's where we're born, and that's where the rising sun comes. That's spring, that's beginnings, new beginnings. And then in the south, that's our youth. You know, my grandchildren are in their youth, as summer, it's emotional life, the fullness of their life. And then as we move towards the west, hopefully I'm in the west. I would hope that we gain wisdom and that we've become older. But a person could be an older person who's 90 years old and still be in the east because they never grew up. They still act like a child and they haven't reached that maturity. But when you reach that maturity, you're in the west, in that area of mental introspection and maturity. And then you cross over into the north. My aunt, she's 98, and I've never prayed so hard for somebody to pass, but she passed the other day, and she's going to be buried tomorrow. And she is now in the north, in the white, in the spiritual, where the ancestors are, where the eternal is. And that's the meaning of the indigenous medicine wheel and our 4 cycles, our 4 directions, the cycle of life. As we go in a circle, everything wants to go in a circle. There's no straight lines in nature. So now we'll take you inside and show you the exhibit. So we're inside the Plaster Museum in Bluemont, and this is the Native Voices of Loudoun County exhibit. This is the first case that I wanted to show you Now, this case has some amazing artifacts that were donated by an archaeologist named Dr. David Clark, and one of our volunteers, Lori Seeley, donated some items. If you just saw this case by itself without anything else, I think this is what you might typically see in a museum these days. Dusty stones and bones of time past. And it reiterates by itself that Native people are gone. They're dead, and they're bones and stones, and this is all that's left. But this is just part of an amazing exhibit that I'm getting ready to show you here. And something else that's amazing about this box that helped me appreciate it more. I gave a tour of some little children recently, and this one little boy came through the door, and he came up to this case holding his heart. And he was like, "This is so beautiful. It's just so beautiful." He couldn't stop expressing how beautiful this was. So it is indeed an amazing case that shows different scraper tools. There's examples of quartzite, jasper. Jasper does not grow here on this Blue Ridge Mountain, so that had to be brought in here. These are just amazing. Something else that I'd like to start with is this poster. We have some posters here that we all volunteered to work on, and we agreed to support the posters as Indigenous people if we could use decolonized language, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. This poster acknowledges that long before Loudoun County formed from Fairfax in 1757, that there was already a rich tapestry of Indigenous people already living here for over 17,000 years in this area. And the language groups are Siouan, Iroquoian, and Algonquian speaking people. These were language groups, and within each language group there's different dialects and different tribes, a lot of tribes in each one of these different groups. For example, the Siouan speaking people would have had the Monahawk and the Monacan. Iroquoian speaking would have included the Susquehannock and the Tuscarora. And the Algonquian speaking would have included the Piscataway and Convoy. So you see we have three different language groups. Some teachers are teaching the language as the tribe, and that's incorrect. The language group is a language group, and then you have different tribes within that. Another thing that's really unique about this poster is how we acknowledge the Tuscarora. The Tuscarora lived here. There's a treaty that I'll show you in a moment that was signed with the Tuscarora and the Haudenosaunee that formed and established the boundaries of this county, Loudoun County, Virginia. But the Tuscarora didn't just leave here. They didn't just say, "Okay, we're just going to leave." They sought asylum. So we use what we call decolonized language to describe why a person would leave this beautiful land to go someplace else. I'd like to move you over here to this display because this exhibit is about the past and the present. I'm Lumbee, and this is my Lumbee seal. The United States has a seal of the United States. Our tribe has a logo or seal, and it's the shape of a pine cone. So when you look at the top and the bottom of a pine cone, it makes a certain shape. And this was actually a shape that was taken from a very old blanket by one of my distant cousins of the Lumbee tribe. This is a colonialized apron that my tribe has adopted as a part of our regalia. And then we wear this symbol, and I would carry, there's a shawl that I made over there. I'd wear my shawl here and have my apron. So wherever I go, when I wear this symbol, someone knows I'm Lumbee. I wouldn't wear something from one of the other tribes. I wouldn't wear the Monacan symbol or the Tuscarora symbol. This is my tribal symbol. And the pine cone is relevant to us because we have a lot of pine cones in North Carolina, and we make turpentine from those pine cones. Pine trees make a lot of furniture in this country, and the turpentine was used for colonial boats. Something else that I mentioned about, call this a colonized regalia, is because before the 1800s, before the 1950s, we didn't have to have a symbol. We are Lumbee. We are Indigenous. And when I say we are Lumbee, I'm talking about we Indigenous people. We didn't have to justify or prove anything. But the United States government puts a requirement on us to identify certain aspects of your culture, your language, or different things. You have to meet certain requirements to be considered a federally recognized tribe. So for my tribe, in the 1950s in the United States, the policy was a termination policy. The United States wanted to get out of the Indian business for a long time. To get out of the Indian business meant, well, let's just terminate a whole bunch of tribes, okay? So my tribe was on the block to be terminated. And in the 1950s, we fought with Congress to pass the Lumbee Act, which recognized our tribal name, the Lumbee, based on our Lumbee River. And we adopted certain imagery. One of the requirements that we have to have is a government style, U.S. government style government. So we have a government that mirrors the U.S. government. We have our headquarters in a building called a Turtle Building. My niece is one of our judges on our judicial system. So this is something that we wear to recognize our people. And but we didn't always wear this. We didn't have to justify who we were. Like a lot of other tribes didn't have to do that either. Moving over here, this poster is the Paleo-Indian era and then the Archaic era. And then we move around the room and talk about the Woodland era. What's amazing about the Paleo-Indian era is this photograph here is my husband. This is my husband, Christopher White, at a site in our yard in Bluemont that we studied with an archaeologist for about 12 years to uncover artifacts. This is an artifact that we found in Bluemont, and we sent this artifact to Washington State University, and they date tested it using something called TL dating or thermoluminescence dating. And when they did that, it came back at 10,470 years last used. So we know that this item here was hand brought into this area because jasper does not grow on the Blue Ridge Mountain here, was brought here, and it was last used over 10,000 years ago, which makes this artifact and this site a Paleo-Indian site. And then after the Paleo-Indian era is the Archaic era. And the reason why we call these different eras, the eras that we do, is based on the human technology that was used during that time. So let me give you some examples of technology. This case is provided by the Loudoun Heritage Farm Museum. They provided this travel case that travels around the county, proving that Indigenous people have been here for 17,000 years. And when you look at the artifacts on the top here, they've got a timeline that goes back 18,000 years ago to present. And then they've got these beautiful examples and explanations that explain these different drawers, okay? So if we go back to the drawer 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is the Paleo-Indian era down here in this case. So this takes us back to 17,000 years ago in Loudoun County, where we have our first farmers of Loudoun County. And you can see some of the different items that have been collected. The items in this case were collected by a gentleman who has a farm. And like many people, they till the soil with the tractor and plow, and then they unearth these treasures, lithic, stones, spear points, knives, scrapers, different types of items here from the Paleo-Indian era. And then if you go to case 4, we start seeing the seeds of transformation happen here in Loudoun County. 5,000 years ago, you see these amazing tools, these points, these projectile points that were used to harvest food, maybe deer, black bear. Also, we talk about the different types of food. Sunflowers were beginning to be cultivated and domesticated. Lamb's quarters, we call lamb's quarters, that are goose foot, is a very nice edible. It's almost like spinach and quinoa. A knotweed is a buckwheat family plant that was very common here. Gourds, and then over time we start getting the corn. You know, corn was domesticated between two grasses, and when two grasses were merged together over 9,000 years ago, our indigenous people in South and Central America created corn, and corn has traveled here. So we start moving to the woodland era of ceramics, these beautiful ceramic pieces that have been found here. And you wouldn't spend time making a clay bowl for just an overnight party. You built something like this and made it because you planned on being around for a long time and feeding a lot of people. So the transition between the archaic and the woodland era is marked by these various technological changes, and also the environmental changing, because the Paleo-Indian era was coming out of an ice age. And so things are warming and the plants are flourishing and the trees are flourishing. We see baskets appearing. And then here we have some more pottery pieces, and they're just amazing. And mostly the women would make the pottery pieces, and the women were the gardeners, and they were also the leaders, because our indigenous people in what is now America, it was a matrilineal society where women were the judges and helped lead our people. And then the men would be hunters and go out and defend and protect. When the colonizers arrived, they wondered why the men were so lazy, because the women were doing a lot of the work. We were taking care of the gardens, and we would plant beautiful sunflowers on the edges of our cornfields, and just managing so many things. But, over time, because of colonization, our women have lost a lot of our roles in our communities, and assimilated, was a forced assimilation on our indigenous people here in the country. I'd like to show you something that the people who have come into this exhibit really enjoy seeing. Now, this is not an authentic headdress or, an authentic item or sacred item. It's just used for demonstrations. Because what I wanted to point out is that in Virginia and on the East Coast, our Native American tribal leaders, chiefs or chairman, what titles vary from tribe to tribe. The headdress is not that beautiful southwest headdress that has the eagle feathers that come down the back. Now, you will see some old pictures of Native American chiefs in Virginia and North Carolina wearing those headdresses back in the early 1900s or 1800s. And that was because it was popular for the white audience. They wanted to see that. But traditionally, our headdresses are straight up. So I'm not going to put it on, but the headdress would be straight up. Now, there's a Tuscarora chief over on our other poster over there. The traditional headdress would be standing straight up like that. But then you might also have a whole jacket of feathers or a shawl of feathers, similar to something like this. You could have a whole cape of feathers. I've heard that there was capes made of all hummingbird feathers because there were so many birds. So I just wanted to show you that our indigenous people in Virginia looked different and wore our feathers and our regalia differently than others do. And then moving over here, I want to just recap that we talked about the Paleo-Indian era. We know that we have artifacts. They're in this case. Now, I got to talk to the individual who brought this case for display, and I said, well, where did these come from? And let me show you. I'll show you on this map where they came from. We move over here. This is a map that was made by Eugene Schill. He's an amazing map maker of Virginia. He does maps of other states. He did this, what he calls an Indian map of Loudoun County. So this is Loudoun County in northern part of Virginia. This is the Blue Ridge Mountain. This is the Shenandoah River. This is the Potomac River. And then he's highlighted the different language groups. This really is, what he's saying here is the Siouan speaking people and the Algonquian speaking people. This is just a snapshot in time. He's calling this between 1692 and 1712, which was before Loudoun County was formed. And then, so the artifacts that we just looked at in this case came from this side of Loudoun County, on the eastern side over here and here. And so it matches what he has. He's showing that there was evidence of a lot of houses. These are little houses, woodland or long houses here by the river. And so it would make sense that these artifacts would come from here. So that's, to me, irrefutable evidence and confirmation of continual occupation of indigenous peoples. So something else that Mr. Eugene Schill has done is he's gone out and he's talked to people in Loudoun County, and they've said, I see this and I see this in my yard. And he goes and he captures evidence that other people have identified. Now, some of this has been archaeologically proven through archaeology, and some of it has not been, but it captures a story, a beautiful story that people in Loudoun County are trying to tell about indigenous people being here. One of the things that I really love about his map, one of my favorite things, is the fishing traps. Here's an example down here of the fishing traps, or I like to call them fishing weirs. And it's identified on the rivers by this arrow. It's a little black mark that you can see along the river here in the Shenandoah, and then over here in the Potomac. There's lots of these little marks. Those marks are called fishing weirs. And what happened is, along the river, our indigenous people would take these huge boulders or small rocks, but a lot of times big boulders, and build a wall from one side to the other until it met in a point. And at that point, after the fish would come through the current, you could go here and spear the fish because they can't go over that wall. And you could sit here, and I'd probably sit there with a basket and just catch as many fish as I wanted right here. And what's amazing to me about this is you just wouldn't build something like that for an overnight barbecue. You would build these because you have a lot of people to feed, and you have a lot of people to feed for a long time, for eternity. We have no idea how old these fishing weirs are here in Virginia. I had a gentleman come from Australia, and he said theirs are 40,000 years old in Australia. So we have several here in Shenandoah, and there's at least 50 that are still surviving here in the Potomac. I wanted to share with you some information now about the types of houses that you would have found here in the past for indigenous people living in Loudoun County. We move over to this next exhibit here. Here's a photograph here of an Eastern woodland longhouse. And here's also an Eastern woodland wigwam. When I was a little girl, I was told, that Native American people are not that bright. They go cut some trees and some wood, and they live in this temporary house, and that we were poor and that we weren't capable of doing very much. But I'll tell you, you would have to be an engineer to build that fishing weir. I can't build one like that would last through all these storms that have been through, and those fishing weirs are still there. Or to build a beautiful house like this. I think they're beautiful homes. So we built one here in Bluemont a few years ago. Our dear friend, Jen Stone, asked us if we would build a wigwam structure. We did not build like a traditional longhouse because some longhouses are considered sacred among some tribes. So we wanted to just build a temporary home. This is one way that you could build the home, by digging a hole, putting rocks in the bottom of the ground, and then make a source for collecting the rainwater. And then I like to ask the children, what happens when you heat your fire inside your home? And they always get it. They say, you're going to have a warm floor because that water gets warm and the rocks get heated. And then in the summertime when it's really hot outside, The rocks can provide your floor to be cold. So this is a great air conditioning unit inside the structure. I like showing this also to show that this is not teepee land. In Northern Virginia, you do not find teepees. You wouldn't find an igloo. And so the different indigenous homes were specific to the area that a person lived and what tools they had available to them. So here in Virginia, we might live beside a wooded forest that has a lot of bark. So then we might take the bark off the tree. Here, when we built this home in Loudoun County, we didn't have a lot of trees with a lot of bark, but we did have a lot of saplings. So we gathered the saplings in a good way. We prayed and we laid down tobacco and we got those saplings, those young saplings. We had volunteers who stripped the bark off the saplings because the water hides behind the bark and your tree is going to rot if you leave the bark on. So you need to take the bark off. And then we took the poles and we put them in a fire. And the reason you do that is it heats it up and it seals the bottom of the tree and takes the moisture out and protects it. So when you put it in the ground, the tree doesn't rot from the moisture in the ground. So we dried out all of those. We took the bark and we hung it up and dried it. And we used cattails to cover our wigwam because we have a beautiful Montessori school down the road. And our dear friends, Toby and Michael, allowed us to go into the field there with the children. We got a grant from Virginia to work with the children to build this Indian village. We used the bark to tie and make lashings to tie everything down. And here's some of the children helping cut the cattails out of the pond. I cut the most cattails. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I cut the most cattails, let me tell you. Okay, so here we are, still carrying cattails, and then you can start to see the structure form. So we took the trees, and I had a lot of volunteers helping build the structure. And then we take the cattails by the armload, like this. So you've got this many cattails in your arm, and then you bend them. When you bend them, now you've got cattails that are this thick, because it doubles when you bend it over. And you bend it over the ribs of the structure. And you just keep going around and around and around until you build it up. And then you have cattails all the way up. So it was a beautiful structure. In about 3 years, it started to dry. And I reached inside through the cattails and peeled back the cattails about 3 or 4 inches, and they were still green on the inside. So our people knew what they were doing to make their houses last, and that's a lot cheaper than putting new siding on your house today. So this is the structures examples. We also would have bunk beds and other structures inside your house. Since heat rises, you can hang your food up inside and dry your food. Over here, I'd like to show you that we've got examples of different weapons and tools. This one is on loan. This is a dart that goes with this thrower, which is an ad-ladle. You can buy these online now. Now this is an ad-ladle. So what you would do is you would use this dart inside this ad-ladle. So I can only throw so far with my hand. But when you use this dart with an ad-ladle, when you fling it, it's going to go so far, so hard. And then what we would do is there's a little click on the end that would release the arrow or the projectile point in the animal. So if you shot, let's say, a black bear, which is delicious, by the way, then that arrow would stay, and then you would recover your dart so that you can just reuse it over and over again. So this is an ad-ladle. Here's a photograph of an indigenous person using an ad-ladle, a different type than what I'm showing you here today. And this photo shows you a fishing weir that we were just talking about. So you can see how the water makes this perfect V across the river. You can see them from a helicopter, and you can also see them using apps like Google Earth and things like that, you can see these fishing traps in the river. We have different tools that we would use, like bone. We can make fishing hooks. We can make spears. These are the types of fish that we might have seen. Look at that huge sturgeon. That sturgeon is longer than they are tall. Today, our rivers are dirty, and we're not able to eat the fish out of our rivers here in Virginia. Maybe again we will be able one day, but not right now. This case is a case that came from my property. These are things that my husband found on our land in Virginia. And these are also items that were given to us. So there's a milling stone, perfect milling stone right here. It matches the milling stone that they found over in other parts of Loudoun County. Here's another stone tool. It's a really good example of a stone axe. And there's a round circle here, a hammerstone perhaps, that would have been used. Or maybe it was a chunky stone. I don't know. You should look up chunky. That's goes back to Cahokia. That's an amazing story. I've got my coyote bracelet in here, some wooden spoons, and some pawpaw seeds that we gathered from our property. I'll talk to you about that in a moment. So there's a lot of beautiful things in here. There's a poster in here that shows you that there's different types of bison that would have roamed back in the day. You know, I used to think there was only one type of bison, but there's multiple kinds of bison. And there's a bison that's called the bison priscus that went extinct. My husband thinks that it's represented in some of these stones here that if you look at them, you can see that they have the shape of animals, of bison, of different animals. And then moving back over here, I wanted to show you something here. This is a shell that has a purple and white color in it. And this is what we call wampum. And that was very important and still is very important to us here on the East Coast. It's a purplish and white color. And then it transforms into, today, this is a modern bracelet that was made by my jewelry teacher, Grant Dial. He passed over this year. He was one of our renowned jewelry makers. So you can see how beautiful it would be in jewelry. So before contact, our ancestors and indigenous people here on the East Coast would use wampum, this shell, to make wampum belts and other things. It spoke a language. You could tell a story with the shells written in a certain way in that belt. So if you wore that belt, a person could look at you and know what it said and who you were and where you were from. When the colonizers arrived and they saw how important this was to us, it became a form of currency. And that's what's taught a lot of times in school. I was told it was because we weren't so smart, so we just used shell as money. Well, it has a much richer meaning and a sacred meaning than monetary system. When the first colonies formed, the first 13 colonies formed, they used the shell as a form of money with indigenous people here on the East Coast to do trading. So let's say if you were in the Pennsylvania colony and you were a white man and you wanted 3 deer hides, then you would exchange, the exchange rate in Pennsylvania would be, let's say, 3 wampum. So 1 wampum per hide. But if you went to the North Carolina colony, you might get 10 pieces of wampum for 3 hides. So the exchange rate was different in every colony. And then, like a lot of systems, they started counterfeiting. And people were painting the shells that wasn't purple, or white that wasn't white, and counterfeiting it. So it lost its value. But we still value the wampum here. If you see someone wearing a regalia with a beautiful purple and purple shells, that's the story they're telling. These are some other items that we have in modern items that we have here in the museum. I have a bison bag. This is my bison bag. And here's a deerskin dress that's been dyed black. This is my modern dress. My shawl that I made with a fringe on it that matches my apron. This is a Cherokee basket that was made by a friend of mine from the Lumbee tribe. And then this is a bag that a friend of mine, Jason Drevnick, made using a walnut dye. And he put a pocket in here for me, which is really nice. And just need to put the strap on it. I'm going to put some beads on it, and I'm going to rock this bag. This case, and around the room, we have different books to bring the past and the present into one place. So we've got a lot of books. Here's some on Cahokia. This is one of my favorite authors is Vine Delora Jr. He has a great sense of humor. You can tell by the title of this one, Custer Died for Your Sins. He uses a lot of humor in his work. But we've got so many books. In fact, my tribal university, the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, UNCP, we have an undergraduate American Indian Studies degree that's now available online. So if you want to take a class in tribal government, or learn about indigenous food, or contemporary issues facing indigenous peoples, there's courses available that you can take at my tribal university. So these are some of my books. So I'm going to show you some more information here, but I'd also like to point out this book. This is one of my favorite books by Jamie and Timothy. Jamie Oxendine and Timothy Locklear made this design book. I don't call it a coloring book. It's a design book. These are actual artifacts that have been found in the Southeastern Indian woodland areas. So here's the woodland Indian areas, and there's the artifact in here that Timothy drew, and then Jamie puts a little history at the bottom about that particular artifact and its significance. This is great for educators because it's perforated, so you can tear the page out and then make copies for students. If you notice the earrings that Jamie is wearing, it matches this necklace that I'm wearing. This is our tribal symbol, the Lumbee symbol, and Timothy designed this necklace that I'm wearing, and Jamie made this other necklace for me. This is woven similar to the way wampum would have been woven on the wampum belts that I was telling you about. So that's my jewelry that I'm wearing. Over here, we have native languages and names that still exist in Loudoun County. So when looking at the current day, the contributions of indigenous sounds still resonate here in Loudoun County, Virginia. We have different words, and some of them we know the meaning of, and some we're not sure about. Like Potomac, for example. If you listen to my people, and I think most tribes would say this, we have our own dialect. So if you hear someone say Potomac, someone else might say Potomac. It sounds different. And then whoever writes it spells it the way it sounds, right? So Potomac was pronounced different ways by different dialects. And Mr. Eugene Schill, who made the map that we saw earlier, gives an example about how Potomac and Padawomac, different spellings. But he also points out that the Potomac River originally meant Cohoogarutan because it was a river of geese and swan. So here in Loudoun County, we have a lot of areas called Goose Creek, which would have come from those other words. So we have words here that we may not even know that originate from a previous iteration of an indigenous word. So we have Algonquin districts, Catoctin, Massanutten, Padawomac, Seneca, Quantico, Shenandoah, Tuscarora, different words that are still here. And then with this poster, this is one of my favorite posters too, about contributions of Native American people to society and to the world. Some people still don't know that corn and potatoes and tomatoes, avocados, wild rice, peanuts, wild berries, sunflowers. So many foods came from the Americas. They started in South America, Central America, made their way up to America. And so when the colonizers arrived, they would have found a bounty of food they had never seen before. Can you imagine? So our contributions to food and agriculture is tremendous. We also, pain relief. Before the 1900s, we didn't have a pharmacy that you could go to. You went to your grandmother's house or someone down the road. My aunt, my grandmother's sister, my Aunt Doshi, she was a fire blower. She could blow out fire. So if we had burns, my dad would scoop you up and take you to Aunt Doshi's house, and she would pray over you, over your burn, and blow the fire out. We have several people among my people who have that ability. So something else that's really important here is this statement right here, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. My husband was the one who pointed out to me that Indigenous people contributed to the Declaration of Independence. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. I worked for the U.S. government for 25 years. I am a retired Air Force veteran. I would know if the U.S. Constitution was influenced by Native American people. I'm lumpy. I would know that, right? I didn't. I did not know it. So you've got to go look this up because it's really important. The U.S. founding fathers studied with the Haudenosaunee for 40 or 50 years to understand how can you have a government up from the people and not down from a ruler. Remember, colonizers came here to escape religious persecution in order to be able to have freedom and not have a ruler ruling down over them. But how would they know how to start something like that? How would they know? They learned from Indigenous people. In the north, the Haudenosaunee, at that time, it was the 5 tribes of the Haudenosaunee. It would have been the Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, the Cayugas, the Senecas, and later the Tuscarora. They had someone visit them called the Great Peacemaker. And the Great Peacemaker helped them create peace among their warring nations. They had a huge longhouse, spiritual longhouse, to protect that peace. And they showed their agreement by burying the hatchet. You've heard of the phrase, bury the hatchet. They literally took all their weapons and put them under a tree, sacred tree, and buried their weapons to create peace. So they had a government up from the people and not down from a ruler. Something else that's really unique about the Haudenosaunee still today, well, there's a lot of things unique about all of our tribes, but we're talking about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, is that their form of government looks similar to the U.S. government, but their judicial system are their clan mothers, and they still have their strong matrilineal society where the women judges decide who's going to be the chief, who the clans are going to be, and are very involved in the government of their people. If you look at the articles of the Declaration of Independence and the articles that contributed to the U.S. Constitution, they are the same articles that the Haudenosaunee had before the Founding Fathers created the Constitution. Y'all got to go look that up because it's really important. We need to get a change to our Constitution training to include our contribution. If you look at the U.S. Great Seal, the Iroquois Confederacy, I say Haudenosaunee, they are the Iroquois. The Iroquois was a name that they were called by somebody else, but they call themselves the Haudenosaunee. So the Iroquois Confederacy, Haudenosaunee, their great law of peace influenced the design for the 13 arrows on the U.S. seal of the United States of America. The 13 states and 13 colonies are represented by 13 arrows that are not easily broken as one. And that concept came from Indigenous people. So we could stand here all day and talk about that. I'm going to take you here to this report. This is a report that we have throughout our exhibit, different QR codes, so people can scan the code and get more information. They can scan the code and get the book that I showed you earlier that I put together. I'm just going to reach here and grab this book. So here is a QR code for this passport that I created. The traveler that traveled to the Indian village here in Bluemont. And it talks about how we built an Indian village here a few years ago and everybody who helped. This report is by Dr. Carol Nash. She's my favorite archaeologist in Virginia. And it's about the Native American communities of the Shenandoah Valley, constructing a complex history. And so it's very detailed. If you'd like to look that up, she's got pictures and all kinds of information and things that she has put together. So we have QR codes throughout our exhibit to include this one. Here's a QR code that goes to a guide that was produced by the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois Confederacy, with the Smithsonian, and it includes information about the wampum. It talks about the wampum belt. It talks about the contribution to the Declaration of Independence and U.S. Constitution. So that's a free downloadable booklet that we are driving people to through this exhibit, especially as educators and students. So now I'm going to take you over here to show you some of the books that we are promoting as a part of this exhibit, and then take you into another room that is more of our current future, because this exhibit is about Native voices of Loudoun County, past and present. On this side of the room, we have different books of the covers of books that I've printed to encourage people to read about different Native American authors. We've got one on decolonizing museums, legends of the Lumbee. They're there. Tommy Orange, that's a contemporary book about metro Native Americans who live in the cities. And we have Remedies, Vine de Laura, the Water Protectors. I love that. We are water protectors. A children's book, Fry Bread. This Fry Bread book, do not read it at night for your children before they go to bed, or else they're going to want you to make them fry bread. So these are some really fun books. This one I mentioned to you earlier. This is my tribal design book by Jamie and Timothy. And then I have this. This is something that I tried with teaching the children, because I find that if the children come into the museum exhibit, they just go wild. And it's hard to bring them back together again. So I came up with this idea some time ago, because I saw someone else doing it at an event. Children will stand in line all day to spin a wheel. And so I let them spin it. And there's various things on here like storytelling, native music, fire making, hunting and fishing, animal tracks, basket weaving, ceremonial, cultural symbols, dances, historical sites, lifeways, wampum, rock art, trade items, various things. So whatever they picked, then I would talk to them about it for a little bit, and then the next child will come up. And it's been very effective. The first time that I used this was at an event years ago, and I had on here, I had ask an Indian a question. And this little boy, he leaned into me, and he looked to make sure his parents couldn't hear what he said. And he asked me, "Did we really kill you all?" And it just broke my heart, because that's what our children are taking away from what they're learning, that Native Americans are no longer here, we're all gone, and the white people killed them all. And he was carrying that burden on his back. And so I was able to tell him, no, you had nothing to do with it, and I didn't either. Something happened a long time ago. So anyway, that's been very useful in helping communicate with the children. The coloring design book that I was telling you about, this is an example of how we have taken those artifacts that Jamie and Jamie and Timothy have put in the book to create these beautiful t-shirts and things like that. This is one of my Lumbee homecoming t-shirts. So I'm going to take you into the other room now, and we'll look at some of the modern things that we have to share. So come with me. The exhibit in this room, it's more about the present. It does touch on the past too. We're really trying to tie in the past and the present in these two small rooms that cover 17,000 years of continual occupation in Loudoun County, Virginia. This poster, I made this poster about food waste because food is something that connects us all. We all have to eat, and who doesn't love food? So I thought it would be interesting to share some of the native foods of Loudoun County. And one of them, of course, is the dandelions. The dandelions that we enjoy today are not the same dandelions that you would have had before contact. But the dandelion can be used for so many things. Get the roots, the leaves, the flowers. The whole part of the dandelion flower is so good for us. And when the dandelions bloom, I know the mulberries are ready. So we pay attention to nature to know when various things are ready. We have a place here down the road called Bear's Den, and Bear's Den has 2 or 3 mulberry trees. This is me eating mulberries, and this is a pie that I made, a modern pie, mulberry pie. This is my friend, Pamunkey friend, Casey Heaster. Casey is holding a whole bunch of ramps. Ramps are so delicious. You can make ramp vinegar, make a salad. It's kind of like in between an onion and something else super special. I was able to plant 150 ramps this year, which I hope come up next year. Sumac, you really have to understand sumac to know which sumac to eat and which sumac not to eat. But sumac is how we made lemonade. You put the sumac seed and water and you've instantly got lemonade. I like making a sumac salad dressing. This is me standing in our sunchoke patch. These tall plants grow about 15 feet tall, and they are sunchokes. When they bloom, this is my great nephew. When these flowers bloom, the root is ready. These are also called Jerusalem artichokes. But the sunchoke can be made into chips and bread. It can be put in soup. It doesn't fall apart like some, this is me holding some sunchokes here. They're great for a person who's diabetic and a person who needs iron, protein, potassium. It decreases your blood cholesterol and lowers your blood pressure. I did an exhibit on the sunchoke at the Native American Smithsonian, and our indigenous people were there, and they kept coming up to me asking for the diabetes medicine. So we see food as medicine, and that this is medicine. This is medicine. This is a pawpaw or pawpaw. A pawpaw fruit, according to Virginia Tech, is the largest fruit native to America. I gathered these pawpaw. This is my friend gave me this apron to gather eggs, and I fill it with pawpaws. Pawpaws. You can make pies, you can make desserts, you can make ice cream from them. I just processed 2 bushels of pawpaws and put them in bags to freeze them, to have them for later. You can make smoothies out of them. Now, these are wine berries. They are not native to this area, but this is my husband and my daughter. So it's a pretty picture, and it balances out the poster, right? So let me show you this amazing map by my friend Aaron Carapelli. He's a map maker out of this world. And what he's done is taking our Native American tribes and locations, tribal names, and the names that the tribe was called by someone else, and the name the tribe called themselves, and put them on this amazing map. So we have this map on display here. And this map really reiterates that we were here in abundance before contact, and we are still here in abundance since contact. There's many of these tribes are extinct, but most are not. We are still here. This is my tribe here, the Lumbee in North Carolina, And then I live here in Northern Virginia, up here. So you can see, look how many tribes there are in Virginia. And look over on the East Coast. The reason why you don't see as many smaller names in here is because the bigger the word, the larger the territory. Of course, everybody's heard of the Navajo, right? The Navajo were called the Navajo by someone else. That's what I was told, and that's what this map tells us. The Navajo are the Dene. That's their modern name, but the Navajo also go by Dene and Navajo. The Haudenosaunee were called the Iroquois. They call themselves the Haudenosaunee, and so we have the Haudenosaunee and Iroquois. So this is a very, very special map that we have made available here. This poster was very hard to put together. I felt like it was very important that we talk about the discovery doctrine and its influence in its role in colonization and causing what to happen that's put us in this situation. So I did some research, and we were all taught about Christopher Columbus in school, and we were taught about the discovery doctrine. But you know, it really didn't make sense to me as much as it does now that I've gotten older and I understand it better. So I'll give you a little summary of this poster, okay? In 1493, that was the year after Columbus had gone to Europe and had gone back to Europe. During that time, back and forth, he was traveling back and forth here and taking slaves. You know, Native American women and children have a higher value traditionally, historically, than any other group of people, or male or female. Blacks, Native American, indigenous women and children had a higher value and cost, unfortunately. And so Christopher Columbus and his groups would take our women and children back to Europe and sell them as slaves. And his plan was to get a lot more, because he had an agreement that if he came over, he would get paid a certain percentage of what he was able to obtain. There's a long history about slavery that could be a whole nother exhibit and another talk. But during that time, the Catholic Pope started issuing something called a decree, or a bull. It was called a bull. And the popes would issue these bulls to different colonial powers like Spain or Portugal to give them approval on behalf of God that they could go seize lands and subjugate the people in those new worlds if they're not Christian. Well, Christopher Columbus already knew they weren't Christian. And at least in the Caribbean where he was, he never actually came here. He only came to the Caribbean area. So the bulls were giving authorization for the colonial powers to dominate and claim dominion over the rest of the world. And these countries would hire mercenaries who were literally anointed by the Catholic Church to speak on behalf of God as God's agents, and they were furnished with a license to kill and destroy the people. It was a legal license that they had. So when they came, they considered this empty land and subjugated the people to get gold, and you know the story. But this went on for several hundred years in the Caribbean, the Aztec, the Inca, the Arctic, the Pacific, around the world, and then also in India and around the world. This image is a classic image that demonstrates what happened here in America. This image was on the cover of one of my grade school books in my Indian school when I was growing up, of this beautiful white maiden who's floating towards the west and leaving this beautiful east and taking the trains and the horses and the buggies and the wagons and the white paternalistic government towards the west, pushing the Indian back, trying to kill the Indian and save the man, pushing back into the darkness to bring the light. And here is a modern image that I obtained, that was commissioned by the painter Charles Hilliard, to redefine that. This is based on a prophecy, an indigenous prophecy, that one day Buffalo Calf Woman will come back. And there's other prophecies too about white bison, and different prophecies about the black snake, and different prophecies that tells us that one day indigenous people will come back to the East to reclaim land, and reclaim sovereignty, reclaim food sovereignty, to clean up this mess that's happened here in the East. And so this picture shows the buffalo coming back, and our indigenous people and our lifeways coming back. And that really has started. That started in the 60s and 70s, and even beyond that. There's been a revolution for a long time. But in the 1950s, as I was saying, the policy in the United States was a termination policy. They were getting out of the Indian business. And in the 60s and 70s, you had a new movement among Indian people to come together. The American Indian movement, for example, was a movement that happened during that time. And AIM's goal was to say, no, don't do this anymore. And for our indigenous people to take a stand, and other people came and took a stand with us. You've probably heard of Alcatraz. It's a prison that had been vacated and it was empty, where our indigenous people used the discovery doctrine to go conquer Alcatraz and to live there. And so that's a whole nother story. But now that time has passed and we're in the future now, we can look back and we know that this is a new movement that started. It was a movement of self-determination and tribal sovereignty that's getting us closer and closer to some forms of restoration. And one thing that's been underway for a few years now is in 2007, the United Nations created something called the UNDRIP. It's the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And this was something that was done around the world that recognizes indigenous peoples' lifeways, religion. We did not have freedom of religion in this country. We're still working on that. Our indigenous people didn't become U.S. citizens until the 1920s. The United States and Canada are two of the only countries that have not signed the UNDRIP. So, today we are still here. The fact that I can stand as a Lumbee woman in this beautiful museum in Bluemont in Northern Virginia and talk about the discovery doctrine is a testament that we are still here. And it serves as our declaration that we have indigenous resilience, cultural pride, self-determination, despite what's happened in the past, that all the attempts of oppression and genocide and the resistance, that's a reminder in our communities that we are still here. And I'd like to give you an example of we are still here in Loudoun County. I have another poster on the other side I'm going to show you. So come over here. Okay, this poster is an excellent example of how we are still here in Loudoun County. With each census report, indigenous people in this area continue to grow. Our numbers are growing, and right now we have 1,200 separate nations and sub-tribes in North America. The individuals you see on this poster have been here to Bluemont and to the local area to help us with indigenous activities, educational opportunities, new possibilities. And we have dancers, farmers and beekeepers, military veterans, potters and nappers, artists and environmentalists, influencers, elders, friends, chefs, ambassadors, spiritual leaders. We have people like my granddaughter advocating for missing and murdered indigenous women and children, educating others. Lewis Campbell up in Maryland at the Indian Center in Maryland. He's been here numerous times, promoting food, imparting knowledge, keeping our culture, weaving lives, bringing joy, authoring books, being grandparents. We're here fulfilling aspirations and influencing the next 7 generations. We are still here. I would like to talk to you about why we have a red dress hanging in this two-room museum in Loudoun County. And it represents our Indigenous women who are going missing and murdered, and our children. This has been going on for some time. My tribe is a hot spot for that. There's a QR code in the exhibit where people can go learn more about what that means. But it's an epidemic that we're bringing attention to put a stop to it. And beside this red dress, we have a prayer corner, which a lot of people have been taking advantage of. We're offering different people a way of praying. We have prayer ties that people who have come to this exhibit have left behind, and some sacred tobacco, some little cloths so people can leave their prayers to show that there's a different way to prayer. So the idea is that you put your sacred item in here and then you tie it and you're praying as you're doing it. I've taught a lot of children how to pray through this exhibit, and they wanted to take their prayer ties home with them. And then when I explained to children that once you have your prayer tie, we're going to set that prayer tie on fire. And the children don't seem very surprised. They're like, oh. And then I say, when this burns, the smoke that comes up from your prayer is going to go up to heaven, to Creator, to God. And that if you're close enough to the fire, you'll be able to wear the prayers that are inside this prayer tie, and you can smell the prayers. And the children get it. They understand. This is a modern quilt holder that my husband built from trees on our property to show you that we're still doing woodworking and making things. The earrings that I'm wearing were made for me by my niece. She's a bead artist, and I'd like to show you some more of her work over here. My niece, Brandy Jackson, she's a bead artist. I like promoting her work as examples of the talent that we have. She learned from elders of our tribe using beads and seeds. One of the most beautiful necklaces that I've ever seen came from gourd seed. I'm a gourd artist, so this is a gourd. One of the gourds that I've worked on. It's just a dry gourd. And then I take out the inside and I make jewelry from the seed. And then these are different plants that I carved and burned on this gourd. This one's called a luminary because I put holes in it. So I put a light inside it. It makes a little lamp or a candle, a fire source. So that's a gourd. This is a vase. It's a 60-year-old vase. It was made by my uncle. And this is my hat that my niece made for me. She beaded this hat for me. Isn't that beautiful? And my matching earrings. So we love our beadwork today. And we're still here and we love our beadwork. This is my graduation hat. I graduated from American Indian Studies degree last year. And this is my hat that I beaded. This is my graduation hat. And then so when I would walk across the stage, I would have my eagle feathers hanging from my hat. And that's my hat. This is a picture of my graduation with my best friend. If you're interested in going to my university, you can online. It's the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. So that concludes the formal part of the tour. There's so many more things I could tell you about, like some of the clothing that's in here and the weavings, the modern weavings and the waistbands and the ribbon shirts that men wear. There's so much here to share with you, but I hope that you, without a doubt, are convinced that in Loudoun County, Virginia, we have an indigenous continual occupation of 17,000 years, maybe more, of indigenous people who lived here, and we are still here today. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the tour of the Plaster Museum of Bluemont. For the Native Voices of Loudoun County exhibit past and present, we'd like to thank the individuals and institutions that helped us to make this possible. So we've got the Loudoun Heritage Farm Museum, that had that beautiful case, and Dr. David Clark donated some artifacts. Kevin Hart, Eugene Schill, who did the map, the Seaburgers, with their nice kit, helped with the posters and printing. Lori Seeley, she does all kinds of things to make this helpful. And our president is Peter Weeks. My husband Chris and myself enjoyed working on this exhibit, and we look forward to bringing more Indigenous recognition in Loudoun County and beyond.